At the Agora.
La 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 la.
Oh, I think we're live.
Buenos dias, everybody. I hope everybody is well if you're listening live or if you're listening after the fact. Right now, I think we don't have any viewers yet, but we look forward to seeing you later. If you are listening, if you wouldn't mind just letting us know on Twitter with the hashtag UdG Agora, that would be great. And as with our last Google Hangout, we have the Twitter channel UdG Agora for you to ask questions. So we have Nancy here who will be monitoring Twitter. So if you have a question, feel free to type it into Twitter, and Nancy will pass it on to me. And we have Alan here as well, who will be jumping in as needed as well. So today's Hangout is really about the beginning of week 2, which is where do I get my ideas? And from what we can see in dilo, already so many of you seem to have ideas and you're already beginning to implement them. And this is really great because I think it shows that you have a lot of enthusiasm and you're ready to go and you're excited about teaching and applying some of the things that you learned in June. But we also want you to really understand what this next step is. And the next step in this 8 weeks is to begin planning your implementations. So I'm going to show you examples of what an implementation plan looks like, because we have examples from last year, and we have a sample document that you can use to build your plan. And there's sort of 3 steps to this plan. The first one is developing a plan. The second one is using your triads to get feedback on your plan. And the third part is then sharing it in dilo with us. If you want to get feedback from us or from others in dilo, you can do that. We will say that it helps us as instructors if you want our feedback if you do it in English. That makes a big difference. So let me just share my screen with you. I'm sharing my screen.
Woo!
Wow, that's crazy. I don't want you to see all of that.
That was spacey. I feel like I was just taken to another dimension.
You're taken back to the regular dimension, Nancy, because you are in another dimension.
Are you seeing just one thing now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to, first of all, put this link in the chat. Sorry, hang with me.
I feel like I want to make an echo sound.
It's big. Now, these links to these sample documents will be shared, so you will have them there. So first of all, we want this to be really simple for you, but we want you to really be thoughtful about it. So what I've created here was an example of a challenge implementation around an open textbook. And the information that we really need from you are the headings that are in dark black here. And you can see here that we have the usual title of your implementation, the instructional approach that you're taking, and that sort of thing. But the real sort of information that becomes very important is, first of all, what are you doing with this new approach? What is it replacing or changing? Because one thing that we want you to think about is we don't want you to do something that you always do anyways with maybe a little bit of a twist. What we're really looking for here is you have this opportunity with the diploma to do something different that you haven't always done and to really stretch yourselves a little bit and try something new. So depending on where you're comfortable, what we really want to see is some thought around what are you doing and what does this replace or change from what you used to do. The next important question is, why do you want to implement it? Because really, as we mentioned, actually more than mentioned, we talked about quite a bit in June, is that really what we're doing here, it's okay to use technology, it's okay to do different things, but what we really want is to do these things with thought, that we've really thought about why, the porqué, why are we doing what we're doing? What is it going to change? What are we hoping to have as a result? So when we look at these plans, we really want you and your triads to really think about this question. Why do you want to implement what you're doing? The next section is about how you will implement it. And this can just be a series of steps, but it gets you thinking about the planning part. What are the steps that you need to take in order to implement and prepare this challenge to implement with your students? It can be helpful for us to know when you plan on implementing it as well, because what we noticed in the last group is some people did some challenges at the beginning of this semester, and some did all of their challenges at the very end. But it's useful for us to know where in your course, in the timeline, does this challenge come into play? When are you going to implement it? And then, of course, we have the series of steps in a little more detail. So if I was doing an open textbook, these are the steps that I would take to have my students create an open textbook. Preparation, introduction, monitoring, and completing the activity. We like to know a little bit about how your challenge will align with the rest of your course. So here, really, this is really a checkpoint for you to sort of see whether what you're doing actually makes sense in your course. Sometimes we get really excited about technology and we just want to try a technology that we really thought was fun and we think our students will find as fun. But sometimes we miss the point of how this actually aligns with the rest of our courses. So that's really what this section is for. And the last sort of two parts here of this plan is how are you going to evaluate the effectiveness of learning, and how are you going to capture student feedback on their perception of this activity? Because not only do we want you to think about whether what you did actually had an impact on student learning, but we also want you, as part of this diploma, to actually show proof that you implemented your challenge with your students and that you got student feedback on how they thought the activity was. How did it go for them? And that's where this hangout is really about, because last year we also had questions about, well, how do I get student feedback? What are some ways that I can get student feedback? And so I'll show you some of those as well. Any questions yet in the Twitter stream there, Nancy?
Nope, sorry, I had muted because there's quite loud thunder and lightning here at the moment.
Oh my goodness, we're having stormy fall weather here.
Yep.
It is no doubt sunny and warm in Guadalajara.
Yeah, I keep on looking to see if someone will tweet to let us know you're there.
Please tell us you're there.
It makes us just feel like, yeah, good.
So let me share with you an example of a student last year who actually used this template to create a plan, an implementation plan. That's not the right link. I'm sorry. Hang on a second.
We'll try again.
Let me just jump over here. Excuse me while I screen share my conversations.
Yeah.
Here we go. So this is an example. First of all, the nice thing about this plan, let me go back to it, is you can see it in Spanish here. So if you have any doubts about what I wrote in English in the other one, here's an example that you'll be able to see of a implementation planning document. And this one goes through all the sections quite nicely, I think. And gives you a good idea as to the different steps that he's taking or he took. And I think actually he also used this plan as a way to report back on his activity. So you can actually see in the pink here the evidence of the student work and how he evaluated the activity and how he got student feedback that he could on the activity that is visible for us and for Dilo to actually see. And we had some questions about this last year about how what if the student feedback I don't want to be public and open. And if you have that concern, if that is a doubt for you, just let us know, because there's other ways that you can share that back with us. But really what we're looking for in the student feedback part of this is a summary, because some of you might decide that you want to give a survey to your students about the activity. And we have examples of sample surveys that other professors use. In that case, we don't need to see all the survey that the students submitted. All we need to see is a summary, a resume of this, of what the students said. So really, this isn't about creating a big, long planning document and big, long reports. This is really about just sharing your ideas and your thinking about your activity, how you plan on evaluating it and getting student feedback on it, and being able to share that back with others in Dilo and with the community. Now, I'm going to jump back to... Oh, I hear some children.
I should probably mute that. That's a 3-year-old.
It's not for me.
If you're lucky, she may come up and make a guest appearance before we're done.
There we go. I'm going to show you now some examples of how students did their feedback. Now, the best place, if you're having any doubts about what your final, what it looks like after you've implemented your challenges with your students and you've summarized what you did and you've put it into a nice report, you have, of course, Comparte, which we introduced you to in June. And here you have all the reports from the first group of 300 professors. There's lots of great examples in here. And of course, if you go into any of these, let's take this one for example, you can see that the report basically summarizes some of the headings in the implementation plans. And you'll also see links to the results. So here you can see the examples of the student work that was done in Padlet and the evidence as well. So if I click on this evidence part here, I can see that we have lots of examples of students working on their projects, their actual student examples, and this was published also in Twitter, so there's a screen capture of their Padlet links that were published in Twitter. What I don't see here is examples or a summary of what the students said about the activity. That's the only thing I'm not seeing in here, so we need to be very careful to separate the two. There's sort of the proof that you did this with your students, but there's also the student feedback. What did the students say about this activity and how it helped their learning? So those two things, those two types of evidence are very important. Let me jump back here. This is an example here of a report, a planning document that also includes the final student feedback. This was a nice report in that it doesn't use technology at all. You will recognize the collaborative learning activity here, test-taking teams. All the headings are in Spanish if you want to reuse those headings. She does a great job of describing how she's going to do it and why. And then when we get to the feedback section, you'll see that she's got a screenshot of the Google, not quiz, what do we call those? Google form that she gave the students to fill out. And her summary of that is here. Basically, she says that her students increased their learning, I think, by 9%, which is a really nice instructor evaluation of how the activity went. And she has a summary here of also of what the students said and how she got feedback from the students. So I think this is a great example too, a very simple example of how you can prepare a planning document and also how you can summarize your evidence at the end. Okay. You might be asking, a lot of the professors from the last group used Google Forms to do feedback. It's a very quick and efficient way to do that. Some of them also had students create videos, which I'll show you. This is a great example in Comparte of a final report. It's very long and very detailed, but it also includes all the sections of how and the student feedback part. Let me just go to the student feedback. And here, I think it's here. Here is an actual, again, another sample that this professor used to evaluate the project with his students. So if you're looking for ideas for even feedback forms, in Comparte, if you look for the best way to be is look for a challenge that's like the one you're planning on implementing and do a search for it. And let me just show you that. I'm just going to go there. So let's say, for example, I want to look for how people from the other semester used Padlet. I can go to the search button here and type Padlet, and it will pull up reports on how other professors used Padlet. And of course, then I'll go in and I'll look and see what they did, how they did it, and maybe see if they have a Google form or a way that they use to share student feedback on this project. So that's probably a really good way to start if you're thinking about, wow, how am I going to do this? Comparte is really a great place to start, and I think it should be a place where you start. Does anybody else have, from the others on my team here, Nancy, Alan, do you have any comments you want to make at this point?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was actually going to say something and then ask Nancy to respond, but I mean the first thing and probably what I would think of for student feedback is a survey. But I'm wondering about some other creative ways to get student evaluation of the project besides the survey type instrument.
Yeah, and and I'm not the biggest fan of surveys because they're actually hard to design to get meaningful feedback. So I tend to use a lot of qualitative feedback mechanisms, such using one of the liberating structures called what, so what, now what, or 9 whys, which basically you might ask the student, okay, what happened in this experiment? And they observe it, and then you ask them, why does that matter? And they would discuss that. And then, so what would, what next? How does this inform your learning or my teaching? I mean, there's a lot of ways to frame that. And again, you're engaging the whole room in these small conversations of first they think about it individually, then in pairs, then in fours, then to the whole, or to the whole group, 1, 2, 4, all. So you're really making people both think and be able to articulate their experience to someone else, which helps them get clear, and then they summarize what's important. So they're doing the sense making as well. You're not trying to interpret their responses in a survey, which we may interpret correctly or we may not. So I'm always advocating for those kind of qualitative things. And Tanis, you putting up the video is a great way to capture at the end of those sense making processes. Mm-hmm. But if you ask people, how was this learning experience for you? Often you'll get kind of like, well, oh, it was fine, it was fun. It's not enough actually digging in and reflecting on the experience. So use those processes, then go to the video. So
And
show the video, because I think the video is a great way to capture and share it.
although the audio might not come through.
Yeah, I won't play the video, but this is just an example of some professors who just asked some of their students on video to comment on the activity. And so we'll share this link as well. But it's another creative way of doing that. I think, if I recall, last year we also had students who tweeted their feedback. Again, I think, as Nancy says, it's a little bit. I mean, it's a good way to do it if you have a very specific question. It may be one way of getting feedback from your students. Maybe it's not the only way to get feedback. But the idea with this is that, you know, if you're teaching a class of 40 students, do you have to have 40 student videos on feedback? No, you can just get a sample of students. You know, pick 5 and ask them to comment on it.
And if you can structure the prompt, you know, along the lines of the audio assignment that I did in my studio, is the one question that you ask to everybody, and then you get a collage of answers.
Mm-hmm.
Another question I used when I taught my media classes, I would ask my students to give advice to future students if they were doing that same class or that same assignment. And invariably, it's a rephrasing of that question, but they end up like talking to a possible future student, but they're actually talking about their own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a different way of asking the question without it, because when you say, can you give me some feedback on this, students generally will tend to think, oh, I should try to be nice and complimentary to my teacher because they're the professor. And you know, how do you get to the part where the students are actually saying what they took from that experience?
I think you bring up a good point too, which is really how trying something new with your students and then asking them to give you feedback on how it went can be very scary. And we know that that can be challenging. So I think what can be helpful here is to let students know that, you know, in this class you're going to be trying some new things, and some of them may work and some of them might not work, and you really are looking for their honest assessment of how did it go. And while knowing that every time you do something new, or whether you're doing something again, it gets better as you go. We learn from doing things more than once and changing it and that sort of thing. So I think students can be very forgiving if you just tell them up front that you're about to try some things that may or may not work, and you know, you're learning together at that point. So I'm going to summarize this. There's sort of 3 things to summarize. The first thing is that your implementation plan is very important. It's not just about rushing out and implementing challenges with your students. It's really important to put some thought into it and actually go through the planning document, share that with your triads, discuss with your triads, give each other feedback, much like we did in one of our last activities in June. Use your triads to get feedback and help each other. So that's number 1, the planning. The second part of this is really about finding a way to both show that you implemented this activity with your students and that you have evidence and a summary of how students actually felt about that challenge that you implemented. And again, this gets shared back. And the third thing is to look at Comparte. Look at Comparte as your example of what implementing challenges looks like after you've implemented a challenge. You report back to the bigger community about what you did with your students, how it went, how you did it, and are able to share what you did and student evidence. So Comparte is your resource. I think Comparte should be a required activity to search for challenges that you're thinking of implementing. and to see what others did last year and to learn from the experiences of others, because you have that now. The group last year didn't have that. They were doing everything for the first time. So those are the three important things about this next step, that this next week, about getting ideas, thinking about how you will do your plan, and how you will share back. Nancy's got the cards. There you go. That's better. We need to see the...
It's our digital whiteboard.
It's great. Any questions in Twitter?
Sarah Carolina, last semester I asked the students to answer some questions about the activities in a handmade way, like through a letter.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah.
We'll have to share that link, actually.
Oh, I'll ask her if you have a link. Okay.
And then also, you showed in Comparte how to search on a technology. There's also links at the bottom because in the Comparte form, there's a place where they list as tags the technology they used as well.
Ah, yes.
So you can follow. There's ones for Padlet. There's 50-some for Twitter. There's 11 I just saw for Animoto. So if I think that's a good way for people to enter, is to think about some of the tools they used in June, and then to see what professors last year did with them.
Yes, that's it. There's multiple ways to search and to find things in Comparte. There's also the categories as well. So again, spend some time just sort of looking and seeing the different ways that you can discover so many of, I think there's about 200 reports in there from the UdG. And the nice thing about Comparte is that you were actually getting ideas from fellow professors who are at your own institution in your own context. I mean, of course the internet is a great place for lots of ideas, but very often some of these things have to be contextualized to our own teaching context, our own realities, and I think that's the real strength of Comparte, is that it's UdG, and it's from all campuses with all different kinds of students, but it's your context. Sarah Carolina, if you are still out there, we would love to invite you next week to join our video cast if you would like, because it would be great to have somebody from last year to be part of talking about the topic next week. So let us know in Twitter or elsewhere if you want to join us next Friday as well. The experiences of the previous group are so important, I think.
Yep, gotta build. That's I think what's really cool about doing a second year of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Sarah Carolina, of course, is always active on Twitter, and if you want to see all the great stuff that she's doing, go and follow her, and she also uses the hashtag UdG Agora as well. That's all I have. How's everybody else doing?
I think you covered it, ma'am.
Okay.
Time. You get your coffee reward now.
I get my coffee reward, yes.
Café, por favor.
It's early still here, sort of. Well, not really, but earlier than in Guadalajara.
Okay. So we'll be online in Dilo. We'll be watching on Twitter. We will be back here next Friday at the same time, and we will send that link out to you, and onward, upward, into the fray.
And anybody else who's interested in being like one of these people here, you don't even have to speak if you just want to be in conversation and listen. We really want to have more people, both from last year and this year, to join us in these conversations.
Yeah, and know that later on during the 8 weeks, you guys get to lead these things.
Yeah, we're out of, no, we're not out of here. We're
behind the curtain.
Goodbye, everybody. Adios.
Adios. Hasta pronto.